All right, it looks like we are live. Well, welcome everybody. Want to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are and when you're watching this. Uh, my name is Dave Burnison. I'm a senior enterprise advocate here at GitHub. And today we've got this fireside chat talking about harnessing your organization's productivity from day one with enterprise ready tools. So I'm coming to you from Redmond, Washington. Uh, Please drop in chat. Let us know where you're coming from. So little bit about me. How did I land at GitHub? Well, I've been a DevOps junkie most all of my life. I've gone from managing DevOps teams at a software company to consulting on DevOps culture, processes, and tools, to selling DevOps tools, to becoming an enterprise advocate, working as a link between our customers and the product group. So a couple of housekeeping things before we get started here. If you have a question for our speakers today, please be sure to drop it in the Q&A tab. And also watch for new questions from others and vote on the questions you'd like to see our panel answer today. We'll be addressing your questions throughout the event. We've got a few questions to get us started here, but then, yeah, we definitely want to make this interactive. Some tips on the viewing experience. Be sure to join us from your desktop. We recommend using Chrome, Edge, or Safari. Firefox will work as long as you're using the current version. And if you aren't able to see the stream, try refreshing the page. And if you're having trouble and are on a VPN, try disabling the VPN and refreshing the screen, or try logging in by dropping the event link into an incognito window. And finally, for troubleshooting, if you need help with issues on the platform, please go over to the Docs tab on the far right to find some help documents, or you can also email our partner team at Goldcast. All right, well, we have had a fantastic 3-4 days of content here. You know, it started out during the keynote with Thomas, Inbal, Allison, and Mario talking about where we're at today with GitHub and where we're going in the future. There's been lots of talk and enthusiasm about GitHub Copilot. And during the remove developer roadblocks and streamline productivity with GitHub, Kevin Allwell did a great overall demo on GitHub. And we had insight from other enterprises using GitHub on how native security delivers customer value and optimizes the developer experience. Really encourage you to go check that out when the videos become available next week. Now, this afternoon, we've got increasing developer velocity with GitHub Enterprise. My colleague, John Peck, will be hosting and moderating that session. And like we said, all of these sessions will be available next week. So watch for an email for us where you can come back and watch the recording again, share them with your colleagues, and such. All right, so joining me today, we have Mark Huber from Cox Automotive, the Senior Director of Engineering Enablement, Andrew Foster from Humana, Director of DevOps Engineering, and Joyce Wang, LinkedIn Director of Software Engineering. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can get right to the chat and everything. So, Mark, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Dave. Like Dave said, my name is Mark Huber. I am the Senior Director of Engineering Enablement Organization here at Cox Automotive. A little bit about Cox Automotive. There may not be a name that you're familiar with, but you probably are familiar with a number of our brands. If you've heard of Auto Trader or Kelley Blue Book, we're a huge part of the automotive industry. There's also dozens of brands within the automotive industry that you may have never heard of. But groups like Mannheim Auto Auctions runs some of the largest wholesale auto auctions in the world. Our dealer track platforms serve the financing practices within dealerships, and basically all parts of the automotive life cycle is part of the Cox Automotive family's mission. And our mission really is to change the way the world buys, sells, owns, and uses transportation in our world. And so I've been very privileged to lead an organization who provides for the needs, the practices, the tools, the techniques of delivering product in that space. Our organization of about 40 engineers supports over 500 product development teams delivering software and solutions in all of those spaces. And we are big users and fans of the GitHub ecosystem in doing so.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Andrew, you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure, Dave. Thanks for the opportunity. Like Dave said, I'm Andrew Foster. I lead the DevOps organization at Humana. Similar to Mark, my organization's name is actually Enterprise Engineering Enablement as well. And Mark, we have never talked before, so just interesting naming. Humana is a Fortune 41 health and wellness company. We're more than just traditional insurance. We focus on what we call human care, so caring kind of for the whole person. We're the 5th largest health insurer in the United States, and we serve around 5.1 million individual Medicare Advantage members, as well as many of our active duty military families and veterans. So that's kind of a little bit about Humana's business. My team supports 5,000 plus engineers across Humana's various lines of business. And we run everything from kind of your traditional open systems DevOps as well to mainframe and Salesforce DevOps as well. So Humana has a very diverse technology ecosystem that we care for. Dave,
Very
back to you, sir.
And of course, last but not least, Joyce, please introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Hey, y'all. So I'm based in California. I lead the developer UX team at LinkedIn. So my team actually owns many of the UIs that are entry points into our developer tools. And so right now, our main initiatives are actually migrating LinkedIn to GitHub. And we've been working very closely with the GitHub folks on doing this. It helps all being under Microsoft. And we're also building a developer UI platform on top of Spotify's Backstage, which is essentially an open platform for building developer portals. And since my team owns many of these front door UIs, our focus is to make sure that users can navigate through our tools, find what they need, and they won't fall off this recommended path that we have for them, which we actually call the golden workflow path. Yeah, back to you, Dave.
Oh, great. Very good. Very good. All right. Well, I'm going to start with a question for each of you. And that is, well, two-part question. How long have you been using GitHub? How many developers do you have using GitHub today? And actually, how many do you hope to have in the future? So we'll start with Mark.
Sure. So the instance, we use GitHub Enterprise Server here at Cox Automotive, and the main instance that we use collectively in our organization is about 8 years old. But we've actually had several grassroots installations of it, probably going back about 12 years. We actually went through an interesting internal migration to bring everybody together onto a common instance because we were seeing the friction of different instances, people not able to collaborate together effectively, right? So, a few hundred users on one instance, another couple hundred users on another instance. Today, we've consolidated that, and we are just shy of 5,000 developers on that instance. We're right at 4,970 when I checked last night. So I'm just waiting for that ticker to count over 5,000.
Awesome. That's awesome. How about you, Joyce?
So we're actually at 7,700 developers-ish, climbing up to 8,000. We haven't completed our migration yet. In terms of how long, we actually started our first batch of migrations maybe about a year and a half ago in August 2021. But the team has been really working on analyzing GitHub and its offerings, putting together a migration strategy since late 2019. So it's been a couple of years at this point.
Awesome. Andrew.
Yeah, so at Humana, we have right at 1,700 users in our GitHub platform today. We also have and we've been actually GitHub customers since around 2015. We actually have a fairly sizable Azure DevOps instance as well with around 12,000 users. So, we work to integrate both platforms together and take advantage of the cool capabilities there.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Now, this next question, Joyce, we'll start with you. Can you comment on the process of adopting GitHub and migrating from other tools to GitHub?
Yes. It's a fairly long journey, like I said, but I will try to summarize. So prior to GitHub, we were actually on Review Board and Garrett, and our high-level strategy was to keep our CI/CD workflows as is, while moving just the code review and code collaboration workflows to GitHub. So, to start, obviously, we did a requirements analysis just to make sure that GitHub satisfied all of LinkedIn's requirements and our needs. And then after that, we actually worked very closely with the GitHub folks to ensure that we had a test instance provisioned and configured so that we could actually start the process of figuring out how GitHub apps should be designed and implemented. And in parallel, we started putting together mocks of how these apps would look like so that we could actually just get this in front of a wide variety of users across our different personas at LinkedIn, just to get early feedback on these new workflows. And eventually, all of this came together, and that's when we began migrating repos and teams onto our GitHub instance. And in terms of the migration strategy, we chose to migrate our team's internal repos first, just so we could play around with that. And then following that, we actually chose to migrate our flagship teams. And it was an interesting strategy because they were the teams that owned the largest and highest traffic repos. And this was intentional so that we could actually detect potential scalability issues and really focus on a single use case at a time. So that really helped us uncover some early problems. And once we got past that, we continued our migration in a couple different waves. We're still continuing now, almost there at 100%. We're actually at 92% of the way there. So yeah, I guess that's our journey. If you want to know more, we actually have like an article that we wrote up with more details about the journey that I can send to you all.
I think we have that link. Yes, I have that link right here. Let me copy that and drop that into the chat. There you go. All right. So would you did your teams how did your teams feel about that whole process of migrating? Did they welcome the opportunity to adopt GitHub? Was it perceived as a forced adoption? That carrot versus a stick kind of a thing.
Yeah, so actually the majority of our teams really welcomed the opportunity to adopt GitHub. There were a lot of teams that were quite impatient, I would say. And those teams were the ones that signed up to be our early pilot users. And the agreement was that if they were early pilot users, they would have to proactively give us feedback about their experience. However, we obviously know there's a balance that we need to play. We have so many repos and so many users at the company that there's no way, everyone would migrate to GitHub without us kind of forcing them. And so we did have a period of a few months where we opened up GitHub for self-serve migration. But, as that was slowing down, we're currently in a phase of forcing repos to migrate over just so we can, move away from review board and Garrett. We don't want to support, so many systems.
Very good. Very good. All right. Now, would you say, and I'll start with Andrew on this next one, would you say that your development teams are more effective and efficient now that they're using GitHub? And if so, why?
I would say we definitely see benefits from GitHub when it comes to kind of the social coding aspects or inner sourcing. Humana has what I would call fit for purpose strategy around our DevOps platforms. And certainly, when we look to teams needing to collaborate in a highly efficient way around their source code, GitHub is easily the platform of choice there, given the advancements and better interface around pull requests and just the ability to collaborate around source code. We definitely see benefit there. Absolutely.
Awesome. Joyce, you have any thoughts on that? Would you say you're more effective and efficient now?
I would definitely say so. So with GitHub, we were able to shift left. I'm sure many of you have heard this term, to ensure that developers can find out about the actions they need to take, all the errors that they need to address as early as possible. And one simple example I'll share is folks wanting to know whether or not their code change got the right approvals and is now ready to be merged. Because we focused on usability here, we felt like it was very important to surface this information in a PR, right away. And so this way users could know, why their PR was blocked, what actions, who else they have to reach out to get, further reviews. We actually didn't have this previously, so users would, attempt to merge and then find out after the fact that their code change actually failed to be merged and go back and, start over and, have to hunt for the right reviews. The other quick feature I'll talk about is draft PRs. They were really helpful in encouraging our developers to put up changes early and often for collaboration rather than waiting for their change to be perfect. And this is something that we encourage, just constant iteration.
Awesome. All right, let me see here. Actually, Richard, can you go ahead and drop that first poll in there? This is talking about which of these tools are integral parts of your development process. Things like planning and tracking, cloud-based development environments, required code review, fully automated builds and deployments, automated tests, package management, and AI-based code suggestions. Now, Andrew, are you using GitHub as your only tool set, and how important is that first-class integration with other tools to Humana? You mentioned a couple of things earlier.
Yeah, I kind of hinted at Humana's Azure DevOps instance as well. So with GitHub, we've integrated several other popular DevOps tool, pieces of the DevOps tool chain out there, like SonarQube and Artifactory, even things like Terraform Cloud. And so, I think when you think about the DevOps tool chain holistically, there isn't yet one platform that can do it all. And so, we've taken to integrating kind of special, where there's specialized needs around like code quality, for example, with SonarQube or infrastructure as code with Terraform. We've integrated those tools into our developer workflows within both GitHub and Azure DevOps. And also say, it's been really neat for me to see the maturation of the integrations between GitHub and Azure DevOps. Humana heavily uses Azure Boards, for example, for our agile planning and tracking, and the ability to integrate and tie like Azure Boards work items to GitHub pull requests, for example, or build an Azure DevOps pipeline against a GitHub repo. Those types of integrations have helped us use the social coding aspects and the inner sourcing ability of GitHub with our existing, aka existing DevOps platform with Azure Boards and Azure pipelines. And so that's given us a lot of flexibility in our tool chain to be able to provide an experience for engineers to kind of meet them where they are, right? So we definitely provide, similar to Joyce, kind of a golden path, if you will, to production, but we also are able to allow some flexibility for the engineers to work how they want to work and be in the platforms that they want to be in, so that we don't have to have developers context switching or jumping from one platform to another. It's important for us to keep developers within that sweet spot, right, within the tooling that they are most passionate about and most effective in. And so that ability to integrate and for devs to get that feedback there, within their Azure pipeline or within their GitHub action, it helps to, we believe it helps productivity quite a bit by keeping them focused around their tooling.
Awesome. Yes, thanks for bringing up the poll. Yeah, so we see required code review, fully automated build. Yeah, pretty even split across most of these things. Only a few using cloud-based development environments at this point. And there was a question in Q&A about that. And I'll throw this out there to any of you. How are you doing local development environments? Are you using dev containers or code spaces? And that's from, I don't want to, Jayaprakash. My apologies if I'm not saying that name correctly. Does anybody want to comment?
Dave, I can.
Codes? Yeah, please.
So I can say there's a lot of interest in it. Prior to the existence of products like Codespaces, we've seen a huge push into containers and that value proposition around containerized dev environments. We see a lot of teams sort of home growing those solutions to make more reliable and repeatable processes as they develop and deliver software. We have teams that have built full solutions predating code spaces to really standardize remote development environments, based within like EC2 instances and tmux type solutions, to allow developers not just to collaborate inside GitHub, but to literally pair program remotely, virtually, together within their IDEs. It was that's been the evidence that there's desire for that kind of way of working and that kind of collaboration. So for us, this is one that's on our list, that we're very interested to see, how we can bring, a full suite of products to teams, because there's clearly a desire for it.
Dave, I'll chime in on it too and add on to what
Sure.
Mark was saying. We've definitely been looking at code spaces and the dev container concept as well. And it's interesting. We found that it has helped with developer onboarding quite a bit. So we went from maybe a couple weeks to you have someone coding maybe day 1 or day 2, right? And so it's helped tremendously. But we've also seen, at least in a Humana context, that it's forcing a different way to think about development. So dev containers won't have access back to maybe endpoints in our data center, for example, or maybe even in our cloud. And so developers need to think about how they engineer software differently and use like patterns like mocking, for example. And some of these concepts are somewhat new, at least in the Humana context. So I think that's a challenge that we're seeing, but definitely we've seen the benefit from dev containers, certainly. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, let me get back over here. So kind of along with that, we have another poll here. Richard, do you want to go ahead and pop that one in there? How do your developers feel about their current tool set? So just to kind of get a sense for, we can kind of we can share that here and kind of see what the responses are. Actually, we want to see the next one. But yeah, how do your developers feel about the current tool set? And I'll kind of throw that out to, excellent, thank you. I'll kind of throw that out to the team here. So, how did your developers feel? Do they feel better now with GitHub and the integrations that are out there with whether it's the planning and tracking tools? I know somebody also mentioned Jira. Yeah, if you go look in the GitHub marketplace, Jira is one of the most installed app integrations with GitHub as well. But do you want to comment on that shift, hopefully, in going from frustrated to hopefully loving what they're doing, the tools they're using?
My experience has been that, no matter how satisfied they are, they're always looking for something more. And so our developer community's pretty active in getting, giving feedback and, wanting to see the tighter integrations. One of the real benefits of having an organization who really stewards the environment with a strategy means we can do things like integrate whole new tool suites to every repo, right? The APIs let us, deploy a set of webhooks or whatever the need is for a new tool integration, from 0 to 50,000 repos in a single day. And so all those sort of value add tools, sometimes even ones that they don't know that they need, to get those instrumentations and those extra integrations for free by a team, who's providing that on their behalf within a large enterprise, that gets them very satisfied, but it also brings them always wanting more. And there seems to be a sort of a never-ending backlog of new tools that teams are discovering and looking at and wanting to see integrated into the suite. And so that ability to extend and integrate is one of the things we find really valuable, whether it's with third-party software or whether it's with solutions for processes we create internally.
Very good.
Yeah, I can comment quickly too. So we actually have an initiative going on to unify our engineering experience. And this is just to provide a consistent way for developers to, create and manage their new software, whether it's like in our own data centers or in Azure. And as a part of this work, one of our guiding principles is to really ensure that we're adopting industry best standards and practices, and just not adding too much what we call LinkedIn sauce on top of some of these standards, which we have done in the past. And this way, our end goal is to be able to decrease the learning curve for new hires and people who have been in industry for a while.
I like the way you mentioned the LinkedIn sauce there. I came to GitHub by way of Microsoft, and I know Microsoft has their own one engineering system, which is their center of excellence for software development. And yeah, back in the day, there were internal tools like Source Depot and that, but we now standardize on Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, Azure DevOps, GitHub, and all of that. And yeah, there's a lot of things layered. Well, I shouldn't say a lot. There's several things layered on top of GitHub and Azure DevOps, for example. But those things also sometimes lead to what ends up in the products themselves, kind of a thing. So yeah, we're very fortunate, for that. For things that, if you're building on top of GitHub, please go out there to our feedback discussions and say, hey, it'd be great if we could see this added to GitHub, and things like that. Because yeah, we definitely do want to learn from customers like you and from our audience. How can we take some of that LinkedIn sauce, if appropriate, and build it into the systems for everybody's benefit. All right, I'm going to shift gears just a little bit here. Richard, let's go ahead and put up that next poll. So the question is, how does InnerSource form part of your collaboration strategy? And what business outcomes have you seen improve through increased collaboration? Joyce, you want to start with that one?
Sure. So yeah, I guess InnerSource is an area that we're currently looking to improve at LinkedIn. We feel like reuse of code is not, easy for consumers or producers. And as mentioned in my intro, we've been investing in a developer UI built on top of Backstage, and the goal is to improve discoverability as one of the main goals, and to be able to build a marketplace so that producers and consumers can come in, find their projects, source code, and docs that are relevant to them without needing to have that tribal knowledge, which historically has been a problem here at LinkedIn.
All right, Andrew.
I'll jump in on that question too. I would say similar to Joyce, InnerSourcing is a methodology that we're trying to improve on at Humana as well. We actually this year, we began measuring our developer experience just internally through surveys. And one of the consistent pieces of feedback that we've heard since we've started measuring is that developers are seeking, more standard libraries, standard pipelines, easy to consume documentation, those kinds of things. And so, we believe that InnerSourcing can play a big part in improving that and having the overall community help improve. Even so, it's not just kind of one team's responsibility, but it's like all of ours responsibility, right, to improve those things. So, if we can be a conduit for that through InnerSourcing methodologies, that's the approach that we're going to attempt to take. But definitely, similar to Joyce, I think it's something that Humana recognizes as something we need to improve on, and that we are focused on in the next couple of years.
Oh, this is awesome. I'm seeing the poll results here. We're up to 42% saying they have both open source and InnerSource programs. That's fantastic to see, because, going back 3-5 years ago, I would expect that to be a lot lower. So great to see that kind of adoption of InnerSource and open source. Yeah, please, Mark. Yep.
Yeah, I can share for Cox Automotive. InnerSource has been an interesting conversation. We found that there's a real balance between hundreds, thousands of developers, depending on some critical library or pipeline that they can use, and to make that open and visible so people can understand how it works, be able to contribute back to it. but also know at the end of the day that there's someone who owns and is responsible for that thing that they depend on, right? And so having a pretty intentional strategy about how, what things we promote, how we promote them, and make sure there's a sort of strong business strategic ownership behind those assets is important. Usually when we talk about inner-sourcing, we think about libraries and code. One of the more interesting and important success stories for us has been the inner-sourcing of decisions. We have taken a strategy with, in our organization, our architecture organization, but even the broader organization around architectural decision records. We actually document and develop those decisions in the open through Markdown files in GitHub with pull requests and very active discussions, almost like a request for comment kind of process. To allow everyone to not only understand the decisions that are made, but the conversations and the context that led to those decisions, right? And we open those repos up for anyone to make and propose decisions, and so we can work through them collaboratively. And that may not be the classic definition of inner source, but it's been one of the most interesting and valuable propositions for that sort of collaborative ownership through GitHub that we've had a lot of success with.
Awesome. All right, one more question here, and then I think we'll probably shift over to some of the audience questions. So there have been numerous innovations on GitHub over the last few years. Things like GitHub Advanced Security and Code Spaces, GitHub Actions, GitHub Copilot. Can you talk about how adopting one or more of these innovations have benefited your organization? Mark, I'll start with you.
Sure. Actions has really been where it's at for us for the last 13 months or so. We started for the first time ever, believe it or not, in Cox Automotive, an effort to bring together an enterprise-wide offering of continuous integration tooling. Historically, we've come together as an engineering org over many years from different acquisitions, different mergers, different groups coming together. In the spaces of CI/CD was always a locally owned concern. Actions gave us an option, right? It gave us a real platform that we could come together on. We were able to not just the Actions features, but actually provide an enterprise-wide suite of runners that any team can access. And what we say is, it used to be that teams would build Jenkins servers, build TeamCity servers. They'd spend, how many days and weeks setting them up, how much ongoing time patching and maintaining them. Now someone can bring a YAML file and be deploying to an AWS environment in under 5 minutes. And that's been an absolute game changer for us. The adoption rate of it has been wildfire. And so that has been really where all of our focus and all our activity has been. And we've been not just turning on the platform, but we've been integrating it with all of the rest of our processes and workflows, from every end of the SDLC.
Very good, very good. Andrew, Joyce, any comments?
I can just chime in and talk a little bit about a GitOps methodology that Humana is choosing to roll out on GitHub. So, as we're moving into the cloud and looking at Kubernetes workloads and shifting our application, runtime more so to Kubernetes, one thing that we found value in is GitHub's flexibility in terms of driving different ways of working. And so, where the past 4 years or so, we've been really driving towards, I would say, push-based deployments. We found that using, GitOps methodologies and continuous delivery operators to pull those changes in, to the runtime has been it's been a shift in mindset for our engineering organizations, but it's been one that actually provides a more structured workflow and actually kind of enables teams to iterate faster, right? When you are operating more so just around your repo and So definitely a shift for us thinking wise, but we found that sometimes that's good, right? To kind of bust up the way you're working and think differently. It helps to the teams to kind of grow their maturity of their process. So that's one way that we've kind of built on GitHub's flexibility to drive that, I would say, innovation in the way that we work.
Awesome.
Yeah, I guess I can
Go ahead, Joyce.
add a little bit also. Yeah, I guess maybe my answer won't be as in depth because we're actually super early in some of these GitHub offerings. So obviously we want to get onto GitHub first, which is our very first step. But I think after that, it's going to open a lot of doors to these other GitHub offerings. And so there are other teams within my organization that are working towards migrating our CI workflows over to GitHub Actions. This will allow us to align with industry trends, improve our open sourcing workflow, and just simply reduce our operational costs. And then we also have a code experience team looking into actually they're running a Copilot early adopters program, and we have a lot of interest there. About 400 users onboarded. We have about 300 sites on GitHub pages, and our security team is looking into integrating advanced security, and a remote development team is looking into code spaces. And so, like I said, many of these are super early, so we'll have to report back on the outcome in some time. But I'm sure there'll be a lot of benefits to our developers with just having a lot of these offerings centralized in one place, which is GitHub.
Awesome. Yeah, I just want to emphasize what Richard popped into chat there. Yeah, please go over and upvote the questions in the Q&A panel. And actually, I'm going to pop over there now. And what I see as the most voted on question from Sakvidel, hope I'm saying that right. How are you structuring the repo? Is that mono repo or individual repo at domain level? Can you give some heads up on mono repos pros and cons? Andrew, I know you said you could provide some thoughts there.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So, and this is a very interesting debate. I know lots of people fall kind of on different sides of it. I would say for Humana, our strategy has been to drive towards more componentized repositories. So we've taken great pains, and actually just a little bit of backstory on kind of why we went down this route. Humana is obviously operating in the healthcare industry. So we're highly regulated, highly audited in terms of our SDLC processes. And so for us, it's very important to understand what source code maps back to which component in our kind of application portfolio management system, and even within our change management database or CMDB. So we have to really keep all those records really tightly coupled so that when auditors come in, we can kind of say, yep, this is what we released, this is why we released it, this was the funding source, et cetera. And so we actually took to creating what we call an asset YAML file. And this concept lives at the source, root of every source code repository at Humana, and it has identifying information that maps back to our APM record. And that's been kind of a game changer for us because it allowed us to both drive a componentized structure within our repository. So, teams can't release unless they're tying to their repo to one component. So it kind of forces that methodology of, one component to one repo to one pipeline. And so it's kind of, that was a technological check that we put in place. But it also just helps us inventory our source code. Now we can, whenever there's some kind of security incident, hopefully that never happens. But if there is, we can really quickly say, okay, here's exactly where the source code is at. So having that inventory has been a game changer for us. So obviously you guys can tell, like, I'm very passionate about kind of smaller repo size, not only from like a governance standpoint, but also just, smaller the code bases, the easier it is to release, and the more often you can release if you're making small incremental changes. So, that's kind of the way that we looked at it for how we implement it at Humana.
Awesome. Joyce, Mark?
Yeah, I can add a bit. So actually, LinkedIn started off with, so this was 2007, so I wasn't even at LinkedIn, but I hear of these stories. We started off with a monolithic code base back then, and it was good for a few engineers. I think we barely hit a couple hundred, back when this was like early startup, and changes were deployed every 2 to 3 weeks. It was super manual. There was like tedious testing. even deployments, had site downtime required, and just deployment in general, the cycles were super slow. And so actually there was this period of time called inversion, where we decided to, really invest in our tooling, because we decided that, we can no longer handle all this pain anymore. And, at that point, if we decide, or if we saw that trunk was not in a deployable state at any time, engineers had to, stop all forward development, and everyone was like, all hands on deck, trying to get the trunk fixed. So that did not work well. So eventually we switched over to this model that we currently go by. We created this term called multi-products, or this concept called multi-products. And the key is to be able to, with multi-products, to be able to, they're smaller repos essentially. And so we were no longer in kind of this monorepo, in this monorepo world. And the key is to use these multi-products to manage dependencies between each one. And so, let's say for multi-product A, if that depends on, some version of B, then all A has to do is include that version of B in its metadata. And so, with that's just a super quick summary about it. But, some of the benefits that we found were, better dependency management. It was just, we built generic tooling on top of this to be able to help us manage multi-products. Multi-products helped with greater ownership at LinkedIn. Teams could just own their own and not worry about, oh, my change broke someone else's, and lots of finger pointing happened. And some of the other benefits were just commit to deploy time decreased, and we no longer had these ordered deployments necessary.
Very good. Very good. I don't know, Mark, did you have anything to add, or should we move on?
Yeah, just quickly,
Yeah, please.
We've seen a pretty strong shift towards the smaller repos. There's a couple examples of mono repo patterns, but we're as Cox Auto, we're across, we're presenting hundreds, thousands of products by probably 6,000 to 7,000 deployable units. And so we see, I wanted to kind of just point back to what Andrew said. It's funny, we have a very similar situation where we need to even understand the inventory of our landscape, right? And so those individualized repos, tying them up to what we call our workload catalog, and then being able to then cross-reference that. We're introducing YAML files to make the associations back. We're kind of walking backwards into this situation from years of development. But then to be able to instrument that to say what technologies are in use in my catalog, what technologies are being deprecated, who's making changes when, where's the most active development happening. As a large organization, and I imagine many of the people listening today are, the ability to just gather intelligence about what thousands of developers are doing, it in itself is valuable and is a product that you can bring and deliver. Metadata and relationships and organization of information and relating to your organizational structure, your company's org structure, which may or may not always match your GitHub org structure. That is really aided by the smaller, more discrete repos. It's easier to get a much better understanding of what's going on. And so for a lot of reasons, including just like Joyce said, the reliability and frequency of release, we're seeing a pretty strong shift towards the individualized repos. The only kind of counter guidance we ever give to that is if you have extremely strong coupling, if it must be packaged together, then ship it together and keep it together and version it together. But often that's sort of tends to be more of an anti-pattern than anything else.
Very good. Very good. All right. I don't see too many votes, so I'm going to go back to, well, actually, we do have an upvote for this one from Joris. Maybe you can tell me how you do continuous deployments for databases. Does anybody have any tips or insights there on managing database updates? That's
a tricky one. I think maybe we're all quiet because it's tricky. I would say I'll just share from a Humana perspective. This is something that we're working on actually this year. We obviously put more effort into like DevOps for applications, but I think we all know databases are a critical component of most apps. We're actually looking at a third-party product, and again, back to the integration question, right? We're looking at Liquibase to solve this problem for us. We have other solutions, that we've tried internally, and none of them seem to scale quite as well and handle a kind of vast number of different technologies. So, but this is perhaps something that is not an easy problem to solve, and it's something that we're actively working on this year, just within my team. So, yeah, that's a very transparent answer for you guys.
I was furiously Googling over here for the title of a very old book on this topic, and I cannot find it. So let me ask ChatGPT real quick. For us, there is no silver bullet answer, but a couple key principles stand out from what Andrew just said, right? That change, that way of managing the structure of your database, it's got to be driven from code, right? So regardless of tool set you choose, whether it's Liquibase, whether it's tools from companies like Redgate, even some of the more interesting open source frameworks out there, Roundhouse was still a great one. It's got to be driven from code, and it's got to be in that manner of forward iterative non-breaking changes, right? And so there's a lot of documentation technique about how to introduce columns, how to iterate on database table schemas in ways that don't introduce breaking changes. If I find that book title, I'll drop it in the chat. But that whole concept, it's been, it's probably 10 or 15 years old now at this point, and still our own teams sort of struggle to find that sort of working cadence and right combo of way of thinking and tool set to achieve it. But yeah, that is not an easy question.
All right, I did drop in a link there, having come from Microsoft. There's a great article there where the Azure DevOps team talks about how they took Team Foundation Server, which was a classic client server application, to migrating it to the cloud. So there were lots of lessons learned there, and a great article specifically on versioning database updates and versioning APIs and things like that, so that you can get the bits out there on the server and then flip the configuration to say, now use this version and things like that. So great article there. All right, let me go back and see what do we have now as upvoted question here. Well, I will go back to the most recent question, as I don't see many votes there. For InnerSource, how are you managing access versus security, looking to prevent code theft? This is from Jay West. Thoughts?
I guess I'll give a quick answer. So actually, I would say at LinkedIn, our repos are pretty open. Like, we have a pretty open culture of like, hey, if you want to contribute to my repo, like, it's open for you as long as we approve it, your change at the end. So I will say but I will say that, if there's something that needs to be locked down, we have capabilities of being able to do that right now with Apple's. So I feel like with InnerSource, maybe it's a bit too early. We haven't really thought about that, but we do have other mechanisms to be able to do that at the moment.
I'm assuming you leverage like protected branches, right? Nobody can commit directly to like your main branch and things like that. So there's always some level of verification before code hits the main branch.
Yes, I guess something similar along those lines. Yeah, and we also have capabilities of, like, if we really have to, like in code search, right, lock down a repo so that people can't see it. We have permissions to be able to control all of that, because I think one thing that LinkedIn really cares about is ensuring that only people who have, like, if it's a super sensitive repo, only people who have the need to view it or have access to it, like, those are the only folks that should should have that power. So we have pretty good granular controls kind of scattered throughout our tooling, I would say.
Very good. Very good. Mark, any thoughts?
Yeah, certainly we have taken a strong preference to, developing in the open within the organization. We encourage public repositories within our GHE instance. And that, the benefits of that for the organization as a whole has far outweighed any of these concerns, right? But the concerns are real. And so it's actually been an active area of investigation about not so much how to prevent the code theft concern, but even the accidents, right? The unintentionals, where, code may be pushed to an inappropriate location. And so those are something that, we have a whole organizations of people who are quietly thinking about in the background about technical techniques to identify and trace the movement of our intellectual property. But I'll be honest, it's a spot that we'd love to see more from GitHub in tooling and utilities to be able to track and follow it, because it's not an easy problem.
Right. Well, that is an area where, last couple of years we've made advancements in security, whether it's bringing forth enterprise managed users so you can tie directly into your identity provider, providing, custom roles that you can create, to create finer grain access controls and things like that. But yeah, that journey has not ended. Yes, we're still looking at, providing more in, whether it's providing more in audit logs or providing additional controls and things like that. So yeah, that journey definitely continues. So, all right, coming over to the other questions. The next one that I see with the most upvotes from Kevin. How about automated code quality checks? Any checks, stats, any tips? What do you guys use? Thoughts there?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So Humana leverages the SonarQube platform for code quality and that's integrated and actually enforced and required to pass, at least for new code, on all of our deployments via pipeline, whether that's GitHub Actions or Azure pipelines. As you guys can imagine, Humana's got a lot of code bases. We have 25,000 plus repos in our ecosystem, and they're at varying states of maturity. Some have been around for 20 years in terms of source code. And so, we have to help the enterprise move forward and care about things like unit testing and code smells, and ensure that our code quality is up to par with releases going forward. So, we don't have the luxury of starting from scratch essentially. And so, we've taken to integrating specifically on new code, entering kind of tighter policies around code quality. So enforcing, good unit testing practices, ensuring there's clean commits going in, and that's a mindset and that we've really been driving with our engineering community over the past couple of years. And I would say that we've definitely seen a positive trend there for sure. And a lot of it, I think, is just developer awareness. Sometimes devs are running the scans, but not really caring about the output of the scans. And so, we found by putting a hard gate in the process that says, hey, that scan must actually pass, right? A certain quality gate thresholds. It's really helped improve the overall source code health. And also, bringing leader awareness in to a certain extent has helped. So yeah, that's kind of a long-winded answer, but short way to say, yeah, we use SonarQube for our code quality measures. Yeah.
Very good. All right. Any other thoughts there? We could keeping an eye on time here. All right, moving over to our other questions then. Let's go with this question from Ken. How complex were your CI/CD pipelines prior to Actions, and how did that impact your approach to migration?
I guess I can go. Cool. Yeah. So I guess our pipelines prior to action. Well, we're still using those pipelines because we're very early into actions. But I would say they're very rigid and not flexible. We actually allowed for actions like it's very customizable. It is truly a platform where people could come in and add the steps that they want to their workflows. We actually didn't really allow that. So we claim we have a workflow engine that pretty much was had the steps hard coded in them. So and it was very deployment deployment centric, I guess. And so if a new step needed to be added, it was a huge effort for the team. Like we would get user or feature requests, and the team would have to figure out how to get the step added into kind of the overall workflow. So yeah, it was very limited customization, I would say, compared to actions.
The complexity of pipelines for us has always been kind of a signal. We've tried to keep pipeline deployment patterns, which have been in most cases locally developed by teams all across the organization, as sort of straightforward, as simple as possible. Repeated, idempotent style patterns where we can run the pipelines over and over again and get clear outcomes. And so those types of pipelines, those deployment pipelines, have been very good and very straightforward to transition over to actions. Where there's a lot of interest and investigation is the larger concepts of orchestration, right? After the code hits the servers, testing, smoke testing services, watching for key metrics, triggering automatic rollbacks. If a metric is violated in a certain threshold, those types of patterns, that's where our biggest interest and most active conversation is around right now. I don't know that we've found the sweet spot yet on how to model those types of pipelines within actions.
All right, we've got just a couple minutes left. I'm going to go to the other question. It has a couple of votes here. That's from Melinda. What about prioritization? How are you leveraging automation? Which tools? How is that working with GitHub coordination or not? Anyone played with GitHub projects yet? So I'm assuming, Melinda, you're talking about prioritization of tasks, user stories, etc.
I can say, we're not using GitHub projects for sort of our official product delivery, tracking and management or agile lifecycle management. But I do see a lot of uses for teams using GitHub projects in our organization for all the other things that they need to track, right? All of our internal processes. I mentioned those, the process of documenting architectural decisions through ADRs in repos. There's a little bit of a process and life cycle for proposing and reviewing and defining them. We use GitHub projects as a way to keep track and steward those through. And I've seen dozens of other examples of teams finding localized uses for projects because they need a simple, lightweight way to sort of track the progress of activities that they have to do separate from their sprint work. And often that is something to do with what they're doing in GitHub. And so that's been just a very natural thing for teams to gravitate towards. So lots of little less official use cases of it all over our organization.
That's great to see. Joyce, Andrew?
I'll defer to Joyce.
No, I'm good. I don't have much to say on this one. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, real quick, one last thing then, and then we'll wrap it up here. So do you have any parting tips for our audience? Thoughts about GitHub adoption?
We both came off mute at the same time, Joyce. I'll just say, I think don't limit yourself, I guess is what I would say. I think you can adopt DevOps practices with almost any technology stack with a platform like GitHub and Azure DevOps for that matter. So yeah, I would say just keep your mind open. Doesn't really matter what technology stack you're working in. You can do the DevOps with any of them. So yeah, that's my mindset around it.
Yeah, and I would say, once even if you're evaluating whether or not you should adopt it, just try it out, right? Get a couple devs, on your team, have them give you feedback. Early feedback, we learned, is always it's a good thing. Can help you iterate or even pivot directions, right? If you're not getting great feedback about the thing that you're trying.
Yeah, and I love the point about feedback. It's so critical. In any sizable organization who's working on multiple products or has any significant number of teams, there is no one size fits all. You have to solution for all, right? Give them the flexibility, give them the choice. Don't constrain them in the ways that they want to work. This platform, GitHub, is well suited to supporting many ways of working. And yet still letting a large enterprise do what they need to do from requirements, from a governance standpoint. And so, remember that the developers, they are your customers, they are your community, but so is the organization that you serve. And engineer accordingly, right? It is an engineering problem to bring a tool set like this to so many developers. And so don't underestimate the value of your time spent really honing and crafting the offering of GitHub within your organization. It will pay massive dividends to the business on the backside.
Awesome. I want to thank our panelists today here, Joyce, Andrew, Mark. Love to hear your insights and everything. Thank you so much. Also want to remind everybody, we will be sending out an email with links to all of the recorded sessions. So watch for that next week. And please take a moment to fill out our survey. If you go to the Docs tab at the right of your screen in resources or in chat, we'd love to get your feedback. We designed this program for you, and we want to make sure you're getting the most value out of your time here. And we do use this feedback and our learnings to improve our future programs and continue to raise the bar for you. So please don't be shy. Tell us what you think. And with that, I want to thank everybody for being here today, and we hope to see you at the next one. Thanks, everybody.